Maine delays start of voter-approved election law. A year ago, Maine voters passed a citizen-initiated referendum to change the way they elect candidates to state and federal office. But now, state lawmakers have essentially reversed the measure and set the stage for its repeal. Over the last 2 decades, Maine lawmakers or the courts have repealed or significantly amended more than a dozen ballot measures approved by voters, including, most recently, those involving the minimum wage and a tax on the wealthy to fund education. On Friday, Governor LePage vetoed a bill to implement the sale of recreational marijuana, which was approved by voters a year ago. And so it is now with ranked choice voting, a method approved by voters last November in which they would rank their choices for state and federal offices, rather than vote for just one candidate. Under ranked choice voting, a candidate has to win more than 50% of the vote to get elected. Maine is the first state to have adopted this method, though now it may never go into effect. The legislature upended the measure last month. And on Friday night, Mr. LePage, a Republican who was twice elected with less than 50% of the vote and who opposed ranked choice voting, told Maine Public Radio that he planned to allow the legislature's will to become law without his signature. The movement to adopt ranked choice voting was largely inspired by his election. But the governor said that he expected either state or federal courts to strike down ranked choice voting as unconstitutional. The state's highest court already said in May in an advisory opinion that the method violated the state's constitution. The Constitution states that winners are to be determined by a plurality, by winning the most votes, whether or not that constitutes a majority. The court also said the legislature had 2 options: repeal the voter-approved measure and go back to the plurality system, or amend the Constitution to provide for winners to be chosen by a majority. Ranked choice voting was supposed to go into effect in the primary in June 2018. But last month, both houses of the legislature agreed to delay it until December 2021, and they agreed to repeal it if the state constitution is not amended by then. Few state house observers believe that lawmakers will amend the constitution in the allotted time. Doing so requires a 2/3 vote by the legislature, which could be politically difficult in this case, because lawmakers are deeply divided over the issue. If 2/3 did approve amending the Constitution, voters would have to agree. Angry at the turn of events, supporters of ranked choice voting have started a campaign for a so-called people's veto to overturn the new law. If the supporters gather 61,123 signatures of registered voters by February, the people's veto would trigger a referendum on the June ballot in which the state's voters would determine whether to use ranked choice voting. Such a referendum would also suspend the new law for the June primaries, meaning voters could be using ranked choice voting to pick candidates for governor and Congress. Last year, the New York Times examined Maine's decision to adopt ranked choice voting and how it would work. Here is part of that Q&A. Instead of casting a ballot for a single candidate, the voter ranks all of the candidates by preference. So if there are 4 choices, the voter is asked to rank them 1 through 4. If no one wins a majority of the first choice votes, the candidate with the fewest first choice votes is eliminated. For voters, that means if the eliminated candidate was your first choice, then your second choice vote will be applied in the next round of counting. If your second choice is eliminated, your vote for third choice will be applied, and so on until someone wins a majority. Proponents say the method ensures that whoever is elected has the support of a majority of voters. They say this helps increase civility, because candidates need to appeal to a spectrum broader than just their base to win second-choice votes from their opponent's supporters. And theoretically it eliminates the possibility of a spoiler candidate winning. Opponents argue that, because it is more complex, ranked choice voting depresses turnout and leads to more errors, because it can be confusing. In a rural state like Maine, where half of the communities count ballots by hand, ranked voting could also lead to more errors by the people doing the counting. Opponents argue further that the voting method can skew the results toward someone not favored by the majority, and that it can be costly. It was close, 52% in favor to 48% against. But a slim majority seemed to want change, and ranked choice voting had been successful in 2 mayoral races in Portland. Last year's measure was put into motion in 2014, but the campaign coincided with rising voter anger over Mr. LePage.